Okay, I know this is a video about Blackmerle, so if you're just here to see that, please skip to a timestamp somewhere down here. I want to start the video with a little bit of an overview of where we think the industry is at and why that's relevant to constructing this narrative around Blackmerle. So if you'll bear with me, please stick around. At Komune, we love the idea of concepts. Concept is and continues to be one of the main drivers of why we do what we do. I feel like the current industry demands this concept. Every brand introduction we get, every line sheet that crosses our desk, every time someone announces their new collection on Instagram. All of these things have conceptual depth and storytelling, which makes me feel that having concept is requisite to starting a brand. Given that the competition is now so fierce, brands are constantly faced with this existential question: why do you exist? If you don't answer that existential question with this beautiful or captivating concept, then you have to deliver a product that people need. There are practically infinite possibilities when it comes to concept. However, product innovation is not the same. Being able to truly innovate on product design requires excess capital, material resources, production infrastructure, and a creative mind. All that to say, over the last few years, we've seen brands more keen to differentiate themselves on concept rather than product, simply because it's easier. However, this isn't to say that having a strong concept and innovative product are mutually exclusive or that one is necessarily better than the other. Take Rick Owens, for example. Concept and storytelling is imbued within Rick's work. Through that very storytelling, Rick Owens has created a brand where multiple generations of people feel like they can be their true selves when they're wearing his clothes. Seasonally, Rick uses theming and storytelling to contextualize his design choices. We know that Fall 24's Porterville is about his hometown, or that Spring 23's Edfu is inspired by the city of Edfu in Egypt. By providing these tangible points of reference, Rick guides the interpretation of his work, allowing the viewer to quote-unquote fill in the blanks. But what happens when theming or concept isn't the main driver of a brand's identity? That right there, folks, is our very long-winded way of introducing Blackmerle. To us, Blackmerle is a rare example of a brand that differentiates with product as opposed to concept. But that isn't to say that Blackmerle has no concept at all. Since starting the brand in 2016, designer Terry Shin has adhered to his core principle of reduced yet severe. The phrase is inherently oxymoronic, but the idea is that a Blackmerle wearer can blend into everyday life while wearing clothes that are severe. This idea of reduced yet severe is pretty much the extent of concept when it comes to Blackmerle. Each season, there isn't this reinvention or reinterpretation of this core motif. Instead, Terry is just pushing the needle forward in this iterative manner, consistently reinforcing this idea of reduced and severe. By the end of this video, we hope you believe, just like us, that in a sea of storytelling noise, Blackmerle is a breath of fresh air. Alrighty, class. To start, there are three main design tenets that appear most in Blackmerle's clothing: texture, tone, and layering. So before we get into the video, I think it would be helpful if we all developed some shared language together. We'll start with the piece that I'm wearing right now. This is Blackmerle's double sleeve Endo Gray field shirt, one of the brand's core silhouettes. When it comes to texture, we're specifically referring to these distressed threads on the surface of the shirt. As for tones, it's about the varying coloration within the fabric itself. The final aspect is layering, which you'll see in the sleeve of the shirt. Here, Terry has quite literally layered two sleeves on top of each other. That results in layers. For these three motifs, there's a different level of emphasis within each piece. So if we put this on a less than scientific graph that I have right here, you'll see that the field shirt that I'm wearing emphasizes texture and layering. As we get further into the video, using this shared language that we now have, you'll realize that these three motifs are used to varying magnitudes depending on the piece. So let's dive into them individually. Right here behind me, I have a bunch of Blackmerle kind of sectioned into the three parts that we're going to talk about, but for this video, it made sense to kind of start here with textures, which is where we think is the foundation of Blackmerle as a brand. In this case, texture starts at the level of the fabric. When a brand characterizes their fabric as special, they tend to use phrases like, "This is premium Italian wool," or "Our denim is milled in Japan." However, these phrases are just signifiers of supposed quality and do little to tell us about the actual fabric itself. It's similar to the dynamic of concept and product, where these signifiers can lack objectivity. For Blackmerle, Terry approaches fabric very deliberately. Let's come back to our guiding principle. What does it mean when a fabric is both reduced and severe? When you look at Terry's collections, you'll find that these fabrics may look simple on first glance. However, when you get up close, they exude extreme detail. Again, just take the shirt that I'm wearing. From afar, it can be as simple as a gray field shirt, but up close, the surface is animated with all these threads. These Binchotan dyed cargo pants is another fascinating example of texture in Blackmerle's world. These pants are constructed with a washi linen fabric that's been dyed with Binchotan. Binchotan is a type of smokeless and odorless charcoal, traditionally used in Japanese cooking. Washi is a traditional Japanese paper that's made by hand with the inside of tree bark. It isn't like regular office printing paper. There's this sort of texture to it when you feel it. And that's what you're essentially getting on these pants. I hope that's picking it up. This is once again one of those details that are only observed up close. From afar, these pants just kind of blend into the surrounding. To further illustrate this point, we can take a look at Blackmerle's jewelry, which is a collaborative project between Terry and his wife, Selena. Here, the raw material isn't cotton or linen, but sterling silver. Silver isn't inherently textured, but Terry and Selena have made texture the forefront of their jewelry line. Their rings, bracelets, and necklaces contain divots, bumps, and ridges that give the pieces an organic quality. The bone ring's bubbling curves remind me of spores, erupting from the ring's surface. My last little tidbit about Blackmerle's texture and use of fabric isn't exactly related to the brand, but I thought it'd be interesting anyways. Unfortunately, lots of the artisans that Terry works with don't have trained apprentices. As these artisans retire and leave no heir to their craft, a key aspect or characteristic of Blackmerle's fabric emerges: their ephemerality. By design, this was likely not Terry's ideal. I mean, just think about it. Would you want to produce something, have it become popular among your customers, then suddenly cut off production because the fabric runs out? It's probably not ideal. It doesn't take a genius to see that Blackmerle's palette is predominantly blacks and grays. However, we all know that color on clothing isn't as simple as a hex code that you might find on Photoshop. Digital colors are flat and uniform, but color in life is this 3D experience that changes with lighting. For Blackmerle, the tones and depth within the spectrum of black and gray is constantly being considered carefully, where Terry is using light as a device to explore this interplay between just pure black and pure gray. To visualize what we mean, here are a few iterations of grays that Blackmerle has done. On the left is a rat gray hooded jacket, which under light has this slight pink hue to it. In the center, we have a slab gray double front parka, featuring these uneven tones of black and gray. And finally, on the right is the gravel collarless jacket, where there's a textured light gray color that shines differently under different angles of light. These are 3 different grays. This is a gravel, this is a rat gray, and this is a slab gray. And we're always very particular about saying these because Terry's intentionality matters. When you look at the blacks that Blackmerle uses, we find diverse variations as well. I shall leave the exhibits on the screen now, but hopefully this is convincing. With all that said though, let's dive in a little bit deeper into how Blackmerle executes tone. When we're talking about tones and depth that don't include changing the actual color of the fabric, Blackmerle usually employs dyeing and weaving to create different expressions of that base color. We have pigment dyeing, over dyeing, garment washing, and this season you even have that Binchotan dye. What probably also needs to be stressed here is Terry isn't just simply throwing his clothing into a dye vat. There are specific design choices that Terry makes that really optimizes the dyeing to make it look quote unquote Blackmerle. And I wish we had time to go into everything, but we just can't. When it comes to weaving, Blackmerle is creating tones and depth by weaving different slubs of fabric together to create one singular textile. A slub is basically a thread, and when you take slubs with slight variation in color and weave them together, you get this combination fabric that has these rich dynamic surfaces. This technique can be found on both collarless jackets from Spring/Summer 25, but also this, where the fuck is it? This Glen Check field shirt that takes 4 different wool yarns, 2 dark, 2 light, and then you weave them together. Take a look at that. Terry has truly gone to great lengths to show us that these fabrics can be subtle, yet full of personality, all at the same time. For those that watched our intro, maybe this isn't convincing enough for the product itself. And we kind of understand that. We've been focusing on materiality. Let's hope that this final section changes your mind. This last part is perhaps the most interesting part about Blackmerle's brand. All in all, layers is the bedrock of Blackmerle's design identity. If you recall my earlier explanation about layering within Blackmerle's world, you might think, is it as simple as slapping a second sleeve onto every garment? This take definitely has some merit. Layering at its base level is just clothes on top of clothes. However, layering to Blackmerle is so much more than that. It's Blackmerle's signature theme. Let me explain. There are layers to Blackmerle's layers. Here's a visualization of what we're trying to say. The iceberg itself might seem a little crude, but I think we want to talk about that whole iceberg to show maybe what we can't see. And I think that's where I think the value of the brand is really, so bear with me here. Let's start with the part of the iceberg that we can see. If you look at Blackmerle's editorials or lookbooks or even e-com shots, you'll quickly realize that all of Blackmerle's collections are supposed to be worn together. This idea might not feel that special. Don't most brands aim to create a level of cohesion between their designs and their products? But notice what I said here. There's a cohesion between their collections. I think this is the idea that Blackmerle as a whole can be worn together. What I mean when the whole collection can be worn together is Blackmerle has used layering as a way to show that the entire collection has this level of cohesion. But layering to Blackmerle isn't just for the sake of cohesion. I think that kind of undersells the idea because the technique of layering is built into the design itself. On the field shirts, you'll find these extended suite of buttons. On the mohair high neck jacket, there's a bunch of snaps. Or even take the puffer jacket, where you'll find a zipper. To Terry, these details allow for the layering to be apparent. Blackmerle's pieces don't just look good together. They're designed to be worn together. As we descend down the iceberg, we're confronted with one of the more abstract parts of Blackmerle's layering, the illusion of layering through the double motif. If you look at Blackmerle's double sleeve bomber, it seems like the wearer has something underneath. However, the effect actually comes from the peelable sleeve. In reality, there's a wire inside the cuff that allows the wearer to adjust and hold the length of the second sleeve. Moving down the iceberg, we have layered textures and materials. We've been hinting at it throughout the video, but Blackmerle's material composition and treatments is also all about layering. This green fabric up close makes it pretty obvious that there are 3 different colored threads. But if we zoom out, it looks like a blurry green colored swatch. Think of this like pointillism in late 19th century French paintings. Blackmerle is kind of the same way. From afar, I hope this is a collarless jacket that can be appreciated. But when we get up close, if you can see, there are these individual slubs of fabric that make it up. So the final level of this iceberg is a bit difficult to understand, but I promise you it's rewarding. Now, let's present it. Designing in a layered manner. Now that we've gone through each aspect of Blackmerle's design process, you might have noticed one thing. There's so much to talk about during each stage. Think about each stage within this design process as a different layer. That's what we mean about designing in this layered manner. I'm sorry to inject more analogies into all of this, but what helped me to think about this layered approach is to think about it like a cake. Blackmerle, to us, chooses to give equal attention to each layer of this cake. Nothing feels underdeveloped or under-considered within the entire design process. It's just every part of this brand feels like it's been given equal attention. So at the end, maybe the cake looks kind of boring, but there's so much material to each of these layers. It's not just these random hero products that make the brand memorable. It's the whole thing. And I think that's rare these days. As I end this video, I realized that we kind of derailed from our introduction a bit. So I'm sorry if you felt like that wasn't worth it. But I think that to talk about Blackmerle from the perspective of how their clothing fits or how it just looks is undermining what we find special about the brand. At the end of the day, Blackmerle is a brand that to us has consistently delivered strong, compelling work, and it isn't necessarily the concept that's inspiring, it's the effort behind each stage or layer that we just talked about. To write the script, there wasn't a need to wade through mountains of concept or pages of convoluted brand story. No, all we did was just look at the clothes, think about what it was, and just allow us to have this unmediated aesthetic experience. All right, guys, we can roll the credits now. Anyways, your reward this far for making it so deep into the video. Is my mic even on? We're doing an event with Blackmerle in about 2 weeks after this video releases, or 1 week. I don't know. But it'll be early February here in New York. And the whole idea behind the event is that we're gonna bring like 3 or maybe 4 seasons of Blackmerle stuff all together in one place and showcase it. Since we talked so much about this idea that Blackmerle needs to exist together, here we are. We're gonna do it here in New York. So if you're around, please come by. Thank you so much for watching the video. It really means a lot. But yeah, take care.